today we are on day 4, still of 9.1. Again, this is a lot of material for one lesson. It's just amazing to me that the author thinks that you could get all of this content done in one day. So remember, we have 5 days. So day 4, we're going to be using something called the conjugate. This is very similar to rationalizing. So what I want you to notice is look at how our problems have a subtraction or addition in the denominator. So when you were doing day 3 lesson, yesterday's lesson, notice we only had a radical in the bottom. We did not have a plus or minus sign. So we have to kind of adjust our thinking. It's similar, but it is slightly different. Okay, so conjugate. If I were to try just to multiply this, now don't write this down or anything if you're trying to take notes. Let me just show you on a separate piece of paper because it is wrong. If I were to take this problem and I were just to multiply by what we did yesterday, the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. And if you want to include the negative, you could. That's not going to make a difference, okay? Watch what happens when I multiply this out. I get 7 times the square root of 3. Now on the bottom, I would have to go 2 times the square root of 3. And then I would go a negative square root of 3 times square root of 3. So there'd be a negative square root of 9. And then if I were to clean this up again, so the top wouldn't do much, notice the bottom would be 2 square roots of 3, and then the square root of 9 is perfect. But look what I still have right here. So now all I've done is I've taken the radical, and instead of being in the second position, I moved it to the first position, but I didn't get rid of it. So this is called rationalizing. What we have to do today is what's called a conjugate. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this problem, and I'm just going to write it a little bit bigger here so you can see it. We're going to take this problem, and we're still going to multiply by what I would call 1. So we're still going to multiply by 1. We just have to adjust a little. So what you do is you use exactly what you see in the first and the second spot. And whatever symbol this is, you need to do the opposite symbol. So if it's a minus, you do a plus. Okay? So always remember, it's the opposite symbol. That's the key to conjugates. Now, if I was in class, I would stop here and I would say, why do you think this is? Why do you think this works? And I'm hoping somebody out there is saying, well, we learned that when these parentheses are the same, but the symbols alternate, the middles drop. So the outer and the inner will cancel each other out. So I'm going to show you the long way on this first one, and then hopefully we'll be able to skip a couple steps. Now remember, this has to be equivalent to 1. So whatever I put on the bottom, I need to also put on the top. And you don't have to put parentheses around it. I was just trying to help you kind of see the pattern. So on the top, we have a monomial and a binomial. So we're just going to distribute. So 7 times 2, and then 7 times the square root of 3. And remember, the 7 doesn't have a radical, so it's just plus 7. So 7 times 1, and then square roots of 3. Okay? Now, the bottom, we're going to FOIL. And remember, I'm going to do this one all the way out, but then hopefully we'll know the shortcut. So first, 2 times 2, outer, 2 times the square root of 3. Inner, negative times 2. And then radical times radical. And now last, negative times a positive, square root of 3 times square root of 3 is square root of 9. Okay? Now, on the top, there's not much for me to do. So 14 plus 7 square roots of 3. Now the bottom. Can't do much with the 4. Plus 2 square roots of 3 minus 2 square roots of 3. Do you notice how these cancel? And then what's square root of 9? Just plain old 3. So 4 minus 3 is 1, and then I didn't change the top. And that's technically your answer. Now, most people would not put the 1 in the bottom. So most people would just say 14 plus 7 square roots of 3. And that's it. That's all you've got for conjugates. So once you kind of understand how to do a conjugate and how it works, there's not a lot of twists and turns that they can throw at you. So there's only 3 more problems listed on my note page here. Okay, so if you feel confident, definitely try one by yourself before you get started on the homework problems or the exit quiz. Because remember, you only get 1 attempt on that exit quiz. So you definitely want to make sure you understand the concept first. Okay, so if you'd like to pause it, feel free. All right, I'm going to go ahead and run through this. I'm going to only use what I see in the bottom, so square root of 5 and a 1, but then I have to change my symbol. So this is going to be a minus. If I don't change the symbol, my middle terms, like up here, will not cancel. I promise you they will not cancel. So please, please, please make sure you trust me here. You need to alternate your symbols. And then you just copy it again onto the top. Okay? And now we'll distribute. 2 times the square root of 5. And then 2 times the negative 1. Now, hopefully you saw, or you remember from above, when we FOIL, the middles are going to drop. So we really only need to do the first and the last. We don't need to do the outers and the inners. So we're going to go square root of 5 times square root of 5. And then we're going to do the outer, which would be 1 times negative 1. Like that. So let me clean up the bottom here. So this would be 5, square root of 25 is just 5, minus 1. Now we've got the top still. And 5 minus 1 is a 4. Still not doing much with the top, just copying. And now this. If you can get it to this point, you're doing really, really well. And most teachers probably would give you full credit. However, it could go one step lower. So if you look at these positions right here, those numbers are all divisible by 2. So you could go 2 goes in here once, 2 goes in here once, and 2 goes in here twice. They're all divisible by 2. So what we would have is the square root of 5 minus 1. We don't need that other 1 out front, over 2. So either one of those I think would be perfectly acceptable, especially doing this online and where we're at right now. So don't be overly concerned about reducing if you can, get it to this stage or step. So we've got one more up here, which is very, very similar. So if you feel comfortable, you could fast forward through, you could skip this one. You may want to try this one on the bottom just because notice there is another radical on top. But for those of you who need a little bit more practice, I'm going to go ahead and work out 3. But because this is a video, you have the control to fast forward through. But remember, you only get that one chance on the exit quiz. Okay? So here we go with number 3. I'm going to use the conjugate. So it's 4 and square roots of 2, but then I just do the opposite symbol. So if this is a plus, I use a subtraction. Okay? Those are your only choices. And then 4 minus the square root of 2 again. Right? So on the top, we're going to distribute 3 times 4, and then 3 times the square root of 2. So it would be a minus 3 square roots of 2, like that. On the bottom, because our symbols are alternating, our middles are going to drop. So let's just do first 4 times 4, and then last square root of 2 times the negative square root of 2. So that would be a minus square roots of 4. I'm not doing anything to the top. What is the square root of 4? 2. And again, if you can skip a few steps, that's fine. But I'm not there with you, so I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So top is just being recopied. A lot of just recopy stuff. 16 minus 2 would be 14. Now check your numbers. You don't go underneath the radical because your eyes tell you this is a 2. But if you were to grab your calculator and you were to type in the square root of 2, that is really not a 2. Do you see the nasty decimal? So you can't look at that. Now, all 3 of these that are circled have to be divisible by the same number, and they're not. These 2 are divisible by 2, but since the 3 is not, then you're just done. So you cannot go any lower, so you just leave it like this. And then you ask yourself, do I have a radical? Is this as low as it can go? Can anything be combined? And once you've said no to those questions, you're done. Okay? All right, last one, number 4. Again, however, whatever you're comfortable with, if you want to pause it here, you can do that too. All right, conjugate. We're going to go 10 plus the square root of 3. So exactly the same, I just changed the symbol. So 10 plus the square root of 3. The only reason why I wanted you to kind of go through this one is we haven't seen a radical on the top. So I wanted you just to be aware of it. So we're going to distribute. Remember, it's outside, like constant times constant. So 10 square roots of 6. And then we'll go square root of 6 times the square root of 3, which is the square root of 18. Okay? On the bottom, notice again, since these are alternating, which is the whole point, the outers and the inners are going to cancel. So we just do first 10 times 10, and last a negative times a positive, and then square root of 3 times square root of 3. Yes, this will always be a subtraction because these are alternating symbols. Okay? All right. Now, I'll just go ahead and keep going. So let's just copy the top. All right, let's just clean up the bottom. So we have 100 minus, can I skip this step? What is the square root of 9? 3? So 100 minus 3 would be 97, correct? Okay, so let's ask ourselves, do we have a radical in the bottom? No. Is this as low as it can go? Yes, because remember, 6 is only made up of 1 times 6 and 2 times 3, and neither one of those are perfect. So 6 is done. But what about this guy? What is 18 made up of? Look at that one. So this one needs to go lower, okay? So I'm going to take it step by step again here, but some of you might be able to skip steps. So if I just do the square root of 18 right here, if I just do that right there, I'm not changing the bottom or anything like that, 18 is the same thing as 9 times 2. So I've got the front, I've got the bottom, and now what is the square root of 9? So the square root of 9 is 3. But I can't do anything with this 2, so it stays underneath. Now let's ask ourselves a couple questions. Radical, low as it can go, low as it can go. Can these be combined? No, because they're not the same number. Are these all divisible by the same number? And you're like, well, I'm not sure about this one, but there's nothing that goes into 3 that also goes into 10. Just even these 2 can tell you, don't even worry about that. So this would be our final answer. Now, I 100% agree if you're thinking, wow, this is a mess. I almost like the original better. I almost think the original looks cleaner. But this is the correct work for how to do a conjugate. So we've skipped all the story problems, which some of you maybe are super happy with. But please know that by skipping some story problems, we've eliminated where the application is. So at the end of this lesson, when we do our wrap-up day, if you would like to do the extension, that is where you'll see some application. And that concludes day 4.